And I'm about to get started with the work we're going to do this afternoon after those breakout sessions. I want to thank everybody for the work you just did. I think there were a lot of good ideas, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about them a little bit later after the next panel. But before we get to the next panel, we have a real opportunity to get some insight from the United States Congress. And I want to welcome Congressman John Sarbanes here today to speak to us. Congressman Sarbanes has been in the Congress for the past 5 years, and he serves on, and these are important committees on some of the issues we're talking about, House Committee on Natural Resources and the Committee on Energy and Commerce. But more than just being a member and on those committees, environmental education is something that's pretty important to Congressman Sarbanes, and he's been particularly focused on the Chesapeake Bay, but in general, the ability to get citizens involved with environmental efforts and to make the knowledge available to people that they can become better stewards of their own natural resources and give them active roles in the work that we all do together. He's also worked to help build large coalitions of stakeholders around environmental education opportunities. He's also one of the authors of the No Child Left Inside Act to promote healthier children and communities. These are important debates that continue in our body politic writ large, and one that I hope some of the energy today will help continue to fuel. It's a great honor to have Congressman Sarbanes here and to join us today. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming him.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I really appreciate the opportunity to say a few remarks here before we head into the panel. Everything I need to say is on this little piece of paper, so I'm not going to take more than the 8 minutes that has been allotted to me. But I want to thank President Obama and the White House for bringing us together and sponsoring this very, very important summit on environmental education. I want to thank Bob Perciasepe and obviously Administrator Jackson at the EPA for their commitment to these issues. I understand that Secretary Duncan was also here this morning articulating the Department of Education's commitment as well, and of course across the various agencies in the federal government. You have an equal level of commitment. Now this is about trying to coordinate all that commitment and conviction to make sure that we deliver things in a high quality way when it comes to environmental education. I was very proud and honored, frankly, to be pulled in to this No Child Left Inside initiative 5 years ago when I first got to Congress, and was proud to sponsor on the House side the NCLI bill. And now I've had the opportunity, of course, to work with this incredible coalition across the country, numbering more than 2,000 different organizations, environmental, public health, education, you name it. There's plenty of different groups that have connections to this initiative, and I'm just kind of riding alongside, holding on with my fingernails to something incredibly exciting. And I know we have a lot of folks who are part of the NCLI coalition here with us today. When I connected to that initiative, I did it based on two things. I did it probably first and foremost, it was an act of the heart and the soul, because, you know, and these are things Richard Louv has captured so powerfully in his book, that connection that we have to nature and the environment. But, you know, I grew up as a kid crabbing on the Nanticoke River down on the eastern shore of Maryland with my grandmother, being caught on sand dunes with 4-foot tides and so forth. And that formed me, it really did. I mean, I go back to those experiences with nature and the environment as kind of the first impetus for my interest in these issues. But it was also an act of the mind, because when you look at the need for us to engage the next generation and create that spark of educational opportunity when you look at the need to build a workforce for the future and deliver on a green economy, it just makes perfect sense to reach out to people through this connection to nature and the environment. In fact, when I was giving the final argument on the floor of the House 4 years ago, when we got passage of No Child Left Inside in the House, I got on my BlackBerry the notice that a young man in my district, a middle schooler, had just been awarded a Genius Scholarship Award from the 2010 Intel International Science and Engineering Fair. Before that, he had placed as a finalist in a science competition. His subject was the effectiveness of limestone aggregates to mitigate acid mine drainage. But the important part of the story, which I then delivered reading off my BlackBerry, was this happened because of the kayaking trips he used to take on rivers in West Virginia as a young man. And that's what really sparked his interest in the environment, and it led inexorably to this career path for him. And that's what we have in mind for so many of our young people. There's a documentary, a very short documentary called, I think it's called The Next Industrial Revolution. It's about a 25 or 30-minute documentary. And in the course of it, the moderator says something which has stuck with me, and I always talk about this. He says that humans have, for decades, for centuries really, applied much of their ingenuity for looking for ways to combat nature. And imagine what we could do if we took all that ingenuity and applied it to working with nature, really making Mother Nature our partner. And that's what you do when you get together and you brainstorm about the potential of environmental education. And I sort of think about, what do we, as members of the human species, have to do to enter into responsible, constructive, and meaningful negotiations with Mother Nature on these topics? We can start with a ceasefire on the assault that for so many decades we've launched against the environment, and that's what people like Lisa Jackson and Bob Perciasepi are doing. They're protecting the environment and clean air and clean water and conserving the land. So we start there in our relationship with nature. But what you're talking about is really sending, and this is the metaphor I have in my mind. This is my kind of working proposition. That we're, in effect, through environmental education, saying to nature, we're going to send you a delegation of our young people. And we really want to ask you to offer them an apprenticeship. And what Mother Nature brings, her commitment to this memorandum of understanding, is clean air and clean water, open space, some severe weather, just to show how we've damaged things over the years to make that point. And what we're being asked to offer on our side of the table are a couple things. First, we got to turn off the television. I was amazed at this statistic that the average young person these days is spending 7 hours a day on television, internet, video games, handheld devices, and only 4 minutes, that's minutes, not hours, 4 minutes a day in outdoor unstructured recreation. And we all know that it's important for the next generation to be technologically savvy, but there has to be a balance. So that's the first commitment we have to make. The second is to really embed environmental education in instructional programming across the country. It is tempting, and I think in the past the U.S. Department of Education has been tempted by this, to kind of view environmental education as a special. It's, we have kind of the regular programming, and then if we can add a couple of field trips, we've done environmental education. But when you look at it that way, you miss the tremendous opportunity to fully embed it, to make it the overarching framework in which education is delivered. And if you look at schools that have done that, the achievement of the students has gone through the roof. The retention of the staff is near 100%. The energy, the ability to reach out and create partnerships in the community is unrivaled. And that's because they don't just view it as a separate add-on thing. It is the main event, which is why it's so important that the U.S. Department of Education be a leader in this effort. And of course, I understand from this morning we got great news about this interagency task force being revitalized and beginning to bring people together at a high level to coordinate their efforts. So this idea of embedding it is so important. I know you come with that perspective, but it's often hard to sell that to the broader public and to policymakers. So we have to continue to make the argument. The third thing we need to do as we offer nature this partnership is we got to do the coordination, and that's what the task force is all about. And you got to bring the A-team to that. You can't sort of have 5th and 6th level people, as hard as they're working, but they don't have the ability to commit their agencies to this coordinating exercise. And that's what we heard today the commitment is going to be. You have to put resources into this. It's not fair to go to Mother Nature and ask for the apprenticeship if you're not going to resource it. And obviously there's been some disappointment recently because of the pressures that are on the administration and frankly the federal government across the board in terms of the budget. We're not seeing the kind of resource commitment we'd like to see as stakeholders. We got to keep pushing for that. And I thank EPA for its efforts to find resources in spite of that. But if you're like me, you look for the line items in the budget that show that commitment, and we have to keep pushing for that. And I know that everybody shares that perspective. And lastly, we have to bring in the private sector. We got to build that partnership. So when we go to the table, and Mother Nature's sitting on the other side and saying, are you serious about this, or is it lip service? They want to see that we're coordinated. They want to see that we have our act together. They want to see that we've brought all parties to the table, private and public. And I understand, again, from this morning and earlier panels, there's really some exciting commitments out there. So these are all the things we do, and if we bring those things, we'll have a deal. We'll be able to go forward in this partnership with nature and with the environment. And the results will be legion. In the hearings we've had on No Child Left Inside, you see so many benefits presented. The benefits to public health. The idea of enhancing in the next generation this sense of stewardship of the environment so they can care for what we give to them. The idea of the educational benefit. You could throw all those other things out, right? All the stuff that comes from the heart, which is important to us, but put those aside for a minute and just think about the need to build a strong economy and create jobs going forward. And the fact of the matter is, if you light this spark in young people, you will get them on those career paths, and they will find their way to these incredible jobs and economic opportunities. And in that sense, you know, Mother Nature is sort of like a workforce development partner. That's how we got to look at this thing. That's why we want to fully embrace that connection with the environment. And what's so exciting about this, and this is where I'll end, is you are enlisting, when you really coordinate your outreach to the young generation, to the next generation, and you do it by embedding it in that educational opportunity that they have, you are letting loose a very powerful source of energy for our country. Because the young people today, if you create the space around environmental opportunities for them to jump into, they will jump in that space and they will take it to the next level. And that's what I see in their eyes every time I go to one of these outdoor education opportunities where they're measuring the water clarity of the Chesapeake Bay and testing those grasses and marsh grasses and so forth. That's what you're bringing to life. So thank you for your commitment to this. I'm going to continue to work hard on this No Child Left Inside effort. I applaud this morning's announcement about the interagency task force. We'll make sure we pay attention to that, and along with you, make sure that going forward it's as vibrant as it can possibly be. Thank you for all of your great work.
All right, so thank you so much, Congressman. That was very on point and very helpful. Can the federal panel please find their way to the front? You know, I think a number of people have mentioned jobs during the course of the day here, and the future, and how STEM education and the role environmental education plays in that broader arena is important. And what I would like to do now is introduce Deputy Administrator Marie Johns from the Small Business Administration. Deputy Administrator Johns' leadership at SBA, they've had a record year in 2011, more than $30 billion in financing more than 60,000 small businesses across the United States. It's the lifeblood of our economy, but much of this takes place at the local level and also in underserved communities, hub zones we call them. In fact, I just did a Hub Zone conference in Chicago last week that was extremely well attended. Many small environmental firms are looking at how they can become involved with some of the programs we have. And there's a very powerful intersection between healthy communities, i.e. clean from clean sites, brownfields, open spaces, and STEM learning and people looking at these kinds of careers with our overall economic development objectives in this country and for healthy communities. So I'm going to ask Deputy Administrator Marie Johns to come up and say a few words. She's also held positions at Verizon here in Washington, D.C., and has been an entrepreneur herself, so I think she knows firsthand on what's involved. So Marie, welcome to our conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Bob, for the kind introduction, and I regret that I wasn't able to be here for all of your remarks, Congressman, but certainly I was glad to hear your great setup to talk about the economic empowerment and the opportunities in when you look at environmental issues and small business and so on, because I want to say just a word about what we're doing at the SBA. There's a lot going on today. I had hoped to be here for this entire meeting, but we have a group of about 150 officials from historically black colleges and universities and minority serving institutions who are in another part of the White House. And I'm happy to see my friend Dean Johnson from Howard University School of Computer Science, Engineering, and Architecture. And we're talking about young entrepreneurs and how to get more young people bitten with the bug to start small businesses. So this is a great complement to that meeting, and so I was glad to be able to split the time. Many of you may not know, but over the past 15 years, small businesses have created 2 out of every 3 new private sector jobs in our economy. And these are the businesses that are driving innovation, they're driving using the new technology and really creating the economy of the future. And they're our competitive edge across a wide range of industry sectors. And we're seeing more and more small businesses focused on solving the nation's energy challenges. Our goal at the SBA is to make sure that we have the tools in place to support those small businesses and their growth, because small businesses are the job creators in our country, and when we support their growth, that means more jobs. What we do in supporting small businesses boils down to 3 major areas: access to capital, access to federal government contracting. As Bob mentioned, one of our programs is the Hub Zone program, and then access to the counseling and technical assistance that allows the small business person to pull all those resources together and to grow. And I want to talk about one initiative that we're doing in each of those areas. In the area of contracting, for example, we recently launched an initiative with the Department of the Navy to help small businesses working in clean and renewable energy to more easily find opportunities for grants, for contracting opportunities, patents, access to patents across the federal government, et cetera. These are all ways that small businesses can grow, and it allows them the opportunity to scale the new technologies and to grow their businesses. And so what we have done is created a web portal, green.sba.gov, which is a one-stop shop, if you will, for lots of information for small businesses working in the renewable energy space. So I would urge you to take a look if you have not done so. In the area of counseling, we've got a wide range of programs to help clean energy companies get the counseling and the mentoring that they need for their businesses. We have specialized programs that focus on helping businesses commercialize their green energy products and services, and most of those resources are free. In access to capital, we're leveraging our Small Business Investment Company, or SBIC program, to foster investments in long-term loans for small businesses so that they can provide the products and services around energy savings and renewable energy sectors. And many small businesses have the skills and experience necessary to help retrofit commercial buildings, not only in the United States, but also in international markets. And so that's a great and burgeoning opportunity for small business growth, and we're positioning ourselves at the SBA to make sure that we're providing the information and support that small companies need. President Obama's Better Building Initiative is designed to make commercial building space 20% more energy efficient by the year 2020. And so oftentimes access to financing to do that work can be an impediment. So to address those gaps, the SBA is working to encourage the lenders that we work with, over 6,000 around the country, to take advantage of our major loan programs, the 504 and the 7A loans, to allow those loans to be used for energy retrofitting for small businesses. So I want to close by saying that those are just a few of the initiatives that we have underway, but I would urge all of you to visit our website at sba.gov to get more information. I'm grateful that my colleague Asan Wardak is here. He'll be able to stay for the remainder of the meeting and certainly can provide you with any additional information. But again, this is a great meeting, a great conversation, and Bob, again, thank you for letting the SBA be a part of it, because it's clear that all opportunities in the renewable energy space are a critical component of the economy of the future, a way to build a stronger economy, as the President often says, an economy built to last. So again, thank you, and I hope you have a very productive rest of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, I want to point out that the Small Business Administration will be part of our interagency task force, and you can see the connections that exist there. So I'm going to get us started on the third panel. It's my honor to be able to be the facilitator, moderator, or hopefully mostly just a facilitator, because I think you guys are all perfectly capable of spontaneous combustion. So. But here what we want to do is have a conversation and listen to some ideas from the panelists about, since they represent agencies that are very involved with both STEM learning as well as environmental education across the federal government, and how we can best galvanize all the efforts that are going on, how we can be a convener as a federal government or as a catalyst. In the EPA, we love catalysts, particularly ones that are in cars. All right. That was, you know, and I always get a laugh at that when I'm at the EPA, but I could point out, if Marie was still here, but for her colleagues at SBA, that catalysts were started with a small business. We have quite a panel here, and let me quickly mention them or go through their list. You heard from Marie, who had to leave but wanted to make sure she was able to participate. We have John Jarvis, who's the director of the National Park Service. You heard David Hayes earlier, the Deputy Secretary, talk about the largest outdoor classroom in the world, the Department of Interior. John has a bulk of that with the National Park Service, and plenty of people who go to work every day, wake up in the morning, their job, their mission is to extend that education to the American public. And I think they rival the Disney company with the number of visitors they have. I think they win. But one of the things about John that I want to mention is that, you know, he has been with the National Park Service for much of his career, and is, you know, as they say, became the director and having experienced most of the jobs in the office. Michael Feeder from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, down the end of the table there. He's an analyst in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and one of the key things that OSTP is doing, as we call it here, is to coordinate the Committee on Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Education, or COSTEM, as we call it. And you, I think, don't need any explanation here of how important experiential learning is to some of that work. John McGrath is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Communications and Outreach at the U.S. Department of Education. You heard on a number of occasions today how important it is for the Department of Education to be involved with this work, and John, we're very happy that you are here with us today, and your secretary gave a great talk this morning. Michelle Fox is a Chief Strategist for Education and Workforce Development at the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at, guess which department? The Department of Energy. And so thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today. But a number of programs that you might imagine go on at the Department of Energy, and you know, even some of the labs that are scattered around the country, some of them I'm sure you've heard of, have relationships with their local communities as well. So a lot of learning going on. Erica Reed from the we call it the NIEHS, which is the National Institute for Environmental Health Services. Science, I'm sorry. But Erica's here with us today. That organization is part of the overall health structure of the U.S. government, and is very involved with some of the health issues that EPA and other agencies deal with in terms of the relationship between the environment and public health. Obviously a key intersection between what we want people to be thinking about when they're talking about the environment. I was mentioning that when Marie was talking about the relationship between a healthy community and a vibrant community, and all of this comes together in important ways, and Erica, we're glad that you are here. So I'm going to stop with those general introductions and move on to our questions. The format we'll use here is I'll present each one of you with a question, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end to do a little bit of integrating conversation. So John Jarvis, I'll start with you first, and give us some views from your perspective, which is robust in the National Park Service, and how you've used non-government expertise as a catalyst to bring new ideas into the organization. What have you seen in your years of experience in terms of the relationship between the professionals at the Park Service and their relationships to non-governmental entities, and how important are these partnerships to the service?
Well, thank you, Bob. There's no way the work that we do in the National Park Service could be done without working directly with the private sector and the NGO sector as well. You know, when you think of the National Park Service, you tend to think of it as tourist destinations, the places like Yosemite and Gettysburg and Yellowstone and Yorktown. But behind that is a deep education mission, an education institution. If you want to learn about forest ecology or fire ecology, you go to Yosemite. If you want to learn about geology, you go to the Grand Canyon. You can walk through time. If you want to learn about Civil War and civil rights, you go to Gettysburg or Selma to Montgomery or Manzanar. We do internally, within our own staff, as you indicated, I have people that wake up every morning and think about this and get out and have direct contact with kids. We do about 95,000 education programs per year in the National Park Service. We reach about 2.5 million school kids directly, about 4% of the kids in public education today in K through 12. We have 140,000 web rangers out there. But that's just what we do. when you leverage in our partners, it goes up exponentially. We have a number of great partners out there. Some of them are in the room, Nature Bridge, Yosemite Conservancy, the Golden Gate Conservancy, others that carry the mission even deeper into the education programs. I want to give a perfect example of where we've partnered and we've really got a program that has been very, very successful, and that is our biodiversity discovery programs, and specifically our BioBlitzes with National Geographic Society. We know that about 80 to 90% of the organisms that are found in national parks have not ever been identified. So here's a need on one hand. And then we have this other need to get kids outdoors and in the environment. So by matching those two responsibilities with the National Geographic, we've done something called BioBlitz, where we essentially bring scientists and parents and kids together to essentially do a on-the-ground survey of the biology of these parks. So in 2010, we were in Biscayne National Park in Florida. We had 2,500 people working for 24 hours. In Saguaro, we had 5,500 people working with 2,000 school kids. And in this process, over the last few years, we've identified 19,000 new species to parks, some new to science. And so I've been on the ground with these kids while they've been out there. The ability for them to have direct contact with scientists, to actually have something on the ground that they can handle. Their eyes are, the lights go on, the spark gets ignited, and they can see this as an extraordinary opportunity, perhaps for the future, to not only perhaps pursue a career in science, but at least to be knowledgeable about these extraordinary places. So the bottom line to me is I come to this gathering not for an ask, but with something to offer. The 397 branch campuses we have, the 397 units of the National Park System that are spread across this country are campuses for environmental education as well as history as well. So we're actively involved with the Department of Education and others. We're going to be a participant in the agreement, and I've got a great cadre of employees that work in education every day, and I've got a great cadre of partners in that as well.
Thanks, John. I'm going to move on to the other John, but spelled differently. And John McGrath from the Department of Education. You all have been taking some steps, obviously, to get innovative in a way with green ribbon schools and be able to both educate and incentivize healthy school environments and the relationship between that and learning. How did interagency collaboration work for all of you on that, and what are some of the other collaboration opportunities you see across the federal government as we start to look forward to more work together on that?
Sure. I guess first, just for anyone who doesn't know the story of green ribbon schools, let me explain just really briefly. The whole idea is probably less than a year old. I think last year on Earth Day, Secretary Duncan and Chair Sutley and Administrator Jackson did an event together where they said that we will have a green ribbon schools program, which became soon after that the U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon Schools. We took the summer to try to figure out the basic idea, the basic concept, the structure for the program, and I guess the central idea is to recognize schools that are doing a comprehensive job of being green. And so we asked them to do three things. We asked them to reduce their environmental impact and costs. We are looking for examples of schools that are keeping students healthy, and by this we mean healthy school environments, healthy air quality, healthy water, but also we're talking about food and nutrition and exercise and things like that. And finally, of course, effective environmental education. So we're talking about giving students the kind of education they need that prepares them for good citizenship and for the jobs of of the green economy. So we put that together and announced in the fall. Incidentally, we worked really closely with EPA and with CEQ on this. They were our partners, helping us to helping English majors like me devise a program that was rigorous and reliable and honest. We went out to the states with the program in the fall. The notion was that the states would nominate as many as 4 schools to us, and we would consider them. We actually started taking nominations this winter. The nominations closed in March, and for the last couple of weeks, we've been sort of furiously with our partners at CEQ and EPA evaluating the nominations. And next week, we're going to announce the winners, probably at a local school here that would be one of the winners. Now the fun starts. These are. I don't want to scoop Arnie when he goes to the school and announces it, but there are some just absolutely amazing examples of schools, and as a whole, it's a really impressive group. You're going to see schools from urban settings and rural settings and suburban settings. You're going to see schools from really prosperous circumstances, and you're going to be surprised maybe, or the public may be surprised at how many schools represent that serve kids in poverty. I mean, the notion that green schools are some kind of boutique phenomenon will certainly be dispelled when we talk about these schools next week. It's an exciting thing. We expect to bring representatives of all the schools to Washington in June for a celebration, and we also expect in short order to get going on next year. I should say that because of the compressed time schedule, when we asked the states to nominate, this was a heavy lift for them. We were happy to get nominations from 30 states. We expect that number is only going to go up next year as we give folks more time. We're going to ask them to make commitments to nominate sometime this summer. We're going to do a survey, we hope, of schools throughout the nation, green schools, to help us better define just what schools are doing environmentally right now. And then we're probably going to do a lot of work to incorporate more private schools into the mix as well in the coming year. So that's the short story, Bob.
Well, it's great. I think that when you involve schools in any of these matters, you provide a real opportunity for kids, faculty, everybody to be involved, and I think parents as well. And so I think it's a great opportunity that we're going to start off this year with. Erica, I want to turn to you next. I think a number of us have mentioned the intimate relationship between overall public health and environmental health. How are you guys thinking through that relationship and the communication of that relationship? And what, I use this word, but innovative steps do you think might be in the offing that we should all be considering as we ramp up here on improving our coordination on environmental education, that public health link?
So we do that in a number of different ways. We feel that it's important for us to share and provide access to information and resources with various and diverse communities. So one of the things we do, we have community forums. We do 1 to 2 of those across the country each year, and it's an opportunity to bring together members of the public who are interested in public health and the environment. And there's a panel of the NIEHS director, Linda Birnbaum, as well as other federal, state, and local and government health officials, environmental health professionals, and disease and environmental advocacy groups. We also have a group called Public Interest Partners, and our partners, the members, represent disease and patient advocacy groups and at-risk groups who may be particularly susceptible to environmental effects, such as children and women, the elderly, underserved communities. And we also have our partnerships for environmental public health projects, and some of those projects include the Teachers Domain Environmental Public Health Collection out of Boston, WGBH, The Educational Foundation has just completed our K through 12 environmental public health collection of 60 media resources. There's also integrating environmental health-based biotechnology into STEM teaching, where we've done environmental health-based biotechnology STEM summer institutes that was given to teachers from the metropolitan Detroit area, and also air pollution outreach, education, and research capacity building in Alaska Native villages out of Missoula, Montana. That was a project designed to reduce health disparities of Alaska Native people living in remote communities by raising awareness of indoor quality issues affecting respiratory health and empowering students to work in their communities as well as other health personnel to help improve air quality and the health of their community members. So those are just some of the examples.
Well, we're really happy that you're involved. You know, I was remiss, I forgot to mention that what Dr. Reed's office is that she directs. It's the Office of Science, Education, and Diversity, and it's the real intersection between what we're talking about and some of the communities that, the diversity that we're trying to build in the overall movement. So I think the health angle, if I could use that simplistic term, is certainly an important one for how we build our overall structure here, and I thank you for joining us today. Michelle, the Department of Energy, we talked a little bit about their labs, and they may have local relationships, but you all are doing a lot more than that, and thinking about green jobs and the energy economy and the very intimate relationship between energy and the environment. So why don't you give us some thoughts about this from the Department of Energy's perspective, including things like renewable fuels, and how do we build that into some of the education discussions we've been talking about?
Sure. Well, thanks for allowing me to offer that perspective. I think it's a really important one, as you really brought to the forefront. You know, if we don't focus on workforce development, I think we're missing a huge opportunity. You know, environmental education will, I think, remain at an awareness level if we're really not pushing it in the workforce development side. And so we really want to focus on the dignity of earning a living and how your job is part of environmental stewardship. And so, you know, a lot of you might say that I have it really easy because I'm working on solar technicians and wind turbine technicians. And so, you know, obviously there's a very direct and easy connection that can be made. But we're actually really trying to force that sort of systems thinking in areas that are still very much part of the carbon-based economy. And so we've really been talking more about not just green jobs and not just clean energy jobs, but not leaving anyone in the carbon-based economy and thinking about how everyone is actually pushing that forward. So I've really been resisting that how many angels dance on the head of a pin, you know, what constitutes a green job argument. So sorry to be on my soapbox about that. But actually thinking about, you know, how do you create a skilled workforce and how does everyone think about how they're contributing to environmental stewardship within that? And so part of the way we've been doing that is engaging in a very, very large conversation around energy education. And it has resulted in the production of, and allow me for shamelessly showing this off, but it was a 13-agency effort, and probably over 80,000 people contributed in some fashion to a wiki and lots of public listening sessions. But it's a very comprehensive approach to energy education, which will actually part of a discussion about how various sources of energy can be used to power human activities and how energy is influenced by economic, political, environmental, and social factors, and really trying to make that a lifelong learning discussion. And so it's really a pre-K to gray conversation, and part of the excitement there is that it's helping to sort of enable NGOs, government agencies, and others map the white space that's still in existence, because a lot of us are sort of replicating or duplicating efforts. And so this is helping us to sort of say, you know, here's how my work contributes to various principles and how we can see whether it's working through data and evaluation, or how we can improve it, how we can identify best practices and go forward. But it's really exciting to sort of take and span through my job both the education sector and the workforce development sector and help create a robust dialogue in that. Thank you.
Energy literacy.
Absolutely.
So you can see the intersection there, right? Literacy.
Absolutely.
Michael, I mentioned OSTP's role in helping coordinate across the government. How do you see environmental education and overall STEM objectives we have working together from the seat that you guys are sitting in over there? Not that particular seat, but the seat coordinating.
Well, I'm just down the hall, so it's not that far away. But first, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate CEQ and EPA putting this on. It's great to see so many kind of familiar faces. The Committee on STEM includes representatives from 12 agencies, including EPA. We have some of very high representation from the agencies, including Dr. Suresh from NSF and Dr. Wyman from OSTP are the co-chairs of COSTEM, and we have a few of our members here today, including Michelle, also Brandon Jones is here, Lisa Koch, and there may be a few others who I haven't had a chance yet to say hi to. But I really do appreciate the chance to kind of explain where we see the overlap and connections between STEM education and environmental education. A lot of what we've been asked to do is based on the Congressional American Competes Act that was passed, the reauthorization back in 2010. Basically, we're asked to inventory all of the federal efforts in STEM education to show where there's overlap and duplication, and then also to create a 5-year strategic plan that will set a path forward and a framework for how we can work together to be more coordinated and effective and efficient in how we're not only spending our money, but using the broader federal assets that we have to bring to STEM education and environmental education. And so some of those include things like the National Park Service. They include the labs at Energy, and they include a lot of other assets that places like NASA or NOAA and EPA have. So it's not just money that we're talking about here. And in that way, you know, there are environmental areas and natural resources that agencies are overseeing. And what we're trying to do is say, how do we understand where each agency fits in bringing STEM education to the nation, to improve our nation's proficiency and literacy in STEM education, and then also how to prepare the next workforce to ensure that we are ready to move forward economically and be able to make the progress that we need to fill jobs that are continue to be open. And as many of you know, there are connections between STEM education and environmental education, and the places where environmental education kind of overlaps with STEM education, those programs will actually be part of the strategic plan. So in our inventory, we identified 39 programs out of the 252 programs that account for about $3.4 billion in fiscal year 2010. And those programs will be part of, have a voice in designing the strategic plan and in implementing it as well. And then we'll all be working together to track our progress and make annual adjustments to where we are compared to where we want to get to. And part of this is really understanding what each agency can bring so that there is a framework that not only shows what each agency is doing, but then when we go out to partner with public institutions, public companies such as Samsung or Disney or NASCAR who have been here today, they understand what each agency's roles are and what they bring to our national education landscape or ecosystem, if I can borrow that term here with this group. So we're hoping that it will not only provide the agencies a clear picture forward and a way to understand whether or not we're getting there, but also create a way for other stakeholders to connect in a more strategic way to the full federal portfolio of environmental education that falls under that STEM umbrella.
Well, thanks, Michael. Well, that was a good rundown. I'm now going to do what I'm calling the lightning round. That means we only have 8 minutes left, and so you have to be very fast. And I'm going to ask each one of you to say two things. One, based on what you've already discussed and what you clearly understand are the fundamentals that you do in your organization, in your agency, what is one way you see where what you do might be enhanced by improved coordination with another agency, and one thing you think you do that would help another agency? So here's kind of, this is a fun thing. So 30 seconds to think about it. Michael, John, I'm going to start with you. Michael, you sort of already doing integrating stuff down there, so I'll let you go last, but we'll just go right down the line here.
Well,
John McGrath.
real quick, I didn't mention earlier, but Green Ribbon Schools already, we've been doing in partnership with a number of other federal agencies, we're able to channel resources from NOAA's educational resources and EPA's and the Department of Agriculture and Agriculture's Food to School program and Mrs. Obama's Let's Move program. We're already kind of leveraging that. As we make resources available to schools that might be interested in the program, we're kind of acting as kind of a funnel or a conduit for something like that. I think we're going to be doing a lot more of that as time goes on. I think the other thing we've done, I think, is to leverage change at the state level. We have just by virtue of this program, we work with the chief state school officers, many of whom have no idea of how to judge whether a school is green or not. And so they're working with their state environmental authority and they're working with their state science officer. So what we're seeing is that there are new relationships happening at the state level as well as the federal level. And that's all, and we hope to see a whole lot more of that as time goes on.
John Jarvis.
Well, I think two areas that come to mind. One is the Healthy Parks, Healthy People movement. It's an international movement that is recognizing the health benefits of the outdoors by the medical and insurance community. There's a body of evidence that's been developed that indicates the outdoors is actually good for you. And we are literally galvanizing a group of practitioners, physicians that are prescribing the outdoors. Take a hike and call me in the morning, as we call it. And we are working with the Public Health Service and the medical community to advance that. The second piece I think links very close to both the work of the Department of Energy as well as the Green Schools program is our Green Parks program. I'll be releasing the Green Parks Plan this week at an event that sets the standards for all of our facilities in the national parks to meet sustainability goals, top to bottom, everything from lighting to energy use to lead design to biofuels. And we are doing it in a very visible way. So that transition will be a lot of green jobs to train folks on how to do this, and then we can broadcast the results, have students study it, and indicate the efficiencies that come from it.
Thank you. Dr. Fox.
Okay. I think we're already coordinating with probably about 24 agencies and bureaus, so we're delighted. The more the better. I think one of the things that I have my eye on is not to compete with the other literacy efforts that are out there, but to make sure that we amplify each other's efforts. And I've been really excited by some of the conversations I've already had with this room, so really excited about the rest of the conversations I'll have later today. I think I'd like to make sure that we increase our reach to the state and local level. I think too often we sit in DC and don't get out of our own agency building. So that's one of the things that I'd really like to increase where our activity is. So.
Okay, great. Dr. Reed.
So it's important that the general public and students understand the connection between environmental exposures and human health. And so there's a need for environmental health science education to bring together science education, environmental education, health education, to pull them all together. And partnering with other agencies would be a very good way to do just that. We have a number of resources available on our website that we share. We have a science education program through our Environmental Health Perspectives journal, where journal articles are converted into lesson plans for teachers to use in their classrooms. So we can make lots of those sorts of things available and work together and share those resources and get the word out, push forward the information, and provide opportunities and access.
Okay. Michael, I know that most of what you do is really trying to coordinate amongst the
Sure.
agencies, but if you have a couple of key points
There's
you
2
wanna...
points I'd like to stress. Part of the strategic plan to do any implementation of it will require a lot of capacity building across all agencies. So what we're looking to do is, one, leverage the capacity within specific agencies, whether it be around evaluation or expertise in different areas of STEM, connections between different communities, schools or out-of-school communities, or understanding the effectiveness of different types of educational practices. those expertise within agencies. And where there aren't those expertise really within the agencies at a mature enough level, we're looking at working together to build those up enough to where we can work strategically together to move forward in a productive way. And then at another level, working together between the co-STEM group and the EE group that's starting up, we're hoping to have cross-representation across who is on the co-STEM and co-STEM working groups and who's on the EE groups, so that we can develop similar goals and objectives, so that we're working, we're not working at cross purposes, but we're working together to move to hopefully a common goal and a common vision for our nation going forward.
Okay, well, I want to thank you all. I think we have about 2 minutes left in our allotted time. But I think it's easy to visualize how we have a lot of resources at these different federal agencies that are involved with the work that we are all talking about and improving our ability to coordinate, share, leverage. All those wonderful words that we use are sort of low-hanging fruit from the perspective I have. I'm going to move on to our next subject here. We are nearing the end. I want everyone to feel comfortable that we are not likely to end exactly at 3 o'clock. Even though we are allegedly on time, we are going to hear some summaries of the breakout groups, and I want to make sure we give ample time for Richard Louvre, who is here today. Hi, Richard. To be able to give us some thoughts at the end of the day here, and then I'll try to summarize a couple of next steps. That I'm going to advertise now is likely to drift a little bit longer than 3. Not too much, but likely a little bit more. So you guys are on the spot. You have like 15 minutes to summarize everything, including string theory.
I can handle it. There's one physics teacher.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kurt Spalding, the regional administrator up in Boston. But before that, I was the executive director of Save the Bay. So for about 20 years, I played in, I love this term, played in this space of environmental education. So I'm very pleased to be before you. To my left here are our Einstein Fellows who were watching and helping facilitate your session where you talked about the issues and gave some feedback. They're going to give, we've spent some time trying to put what you said into themes, and they're going to speak to each one. I'd like to just introduce them because, well, they don't have labels, but that's okay. Starting here, we have Danelle Hogan from Idaho, and she works at, oops, I didn't write it down. What?
Department of Energy.
Department of Energy. To her left, we have Jean Pennycook from California, and she works for NSF. We have Remy Dow from NSF, and he's from Florida. Where's Alan? Oops, there's Alan on the far left from Florida and NSF. And of course, we have Lindsay Kippenberg, I got that right, who works at NOAA, and she's from Detroit. So these people are real teachers, which is really important in our conversation, because all said and done, it's environmental education. It's about education, at least traditionally thought of. So what we're going to do is ask these folks to do 4 things, and they're going to each take a piece. First, I'm going to introduce the 4 themes. The first theme is going to be community involvement and connections, and Jean is going to talk about that. The second theme is going to be data technology and social media, and Remy's going to talk about that. The third theme is challenges and solutions. You talked a lot about that in your sessions. And Danelle's going to talk about that. And finally, we're going to ask Lindsay and Alan to talk about a teacher's perspective, just a little bit. Now, we don't have a lot of time, so they're going to move fast. So I'm first going to let, I guess Jean's going to go first. So here we go.
So what we did was we took all the ideas from the 3 different rooms, and can you hear me okay? Usually my teacher voice is good enough. Stand up? Okay. We took all the ideas. Oh, just sit down and listen to the microphone. What we did was take the ideas from all the 3 rooms. Is this better? No, it's not even on. How about this? Oh, you have to push it.
No. You can use the podium. Here, why don't you come up here? That's easy. I know that one.
We were denied. What we did as a group is put all the ideas from all the rooms together and then broke them out to themes. So you that were in my group, you're going to hear me speak of the one group of themes, and you're going to say, but we did this too. Well, then you need to wait because the others will address those themes as well. All right, so my topic was the community-based environmental education, and some of the main points that we came up with was to make good citizens by changing social norms, creating lifelong stewards of the earth. We felt that was a part of what environmental education should do. We also felt that we should foster attachment to place by place-based learning, and one way to do that is to get people outdoors. Another reoccurring theme was to create structures for public participation, citizens, naturalists, citizen science, citizen naturalists, things that will get people involved in their area. Also, we hit pretty hard on the partnerships to share resources by systematically reaching every audience, and we use the term, there are many terms, but we use the term birth to earth. So we wanted to see everybody in our country involved in environmental activities and getting people outdoors.
Thank you, Jean. Now, the second group was the data, technology, and social media. I'm going to ask Remy to report on that group.
So we were having a discussion on what nice terms to use. I like the womb to tomb better than birth to earth. That might not be appropriate. So my section, one of the themes that came up was the use of data and the use of technology and social media. And one of the things, using data much more than just as a repository of data, but actually using it as an educational tool, an educational avenue for students to be used by participants from birth to earth in any community-based project as a way of communicating environmental changes in their environment. Well, sounded redundant, but you know what I mean. Changes in the environment and using the collecting of data as that vehicle within the community. And after the collection is done, then how to use that collection as another educational vehicle. And part of the key for this to be effective in communities is for the data to come out of authentic research. And because that will help engage the community and help them identify with the research that they are producing. And related to that, the data transitions to the following point, which is using technology and social media as a tool to get kids outside. And a large portion of our community embraces this technology. And similarly, EE should embrace these tools and not be afraid of them. But technology and social media can be used and harnessed to get kids out of the classrooms, out of their bedrooms, and into the environment. And using these tools to link back to authentic research, using social media to link to these data sets and to link to the analysis and what results can come from these data collection projects. And finally, this data and technology cannot have an effect unless it is both relevant and accessible. And relevancy by connecting it to the community, the classroom, and the informal ed settings, for example. And it should mean something to those that are involved. Useful data and analyses can be communicated through technology and social media in ways that is relevant to that community. But access to the technology, particularly for teachers, is crucial as well. And when considering that often classroom bandwidth and even internet access is limited, there should be ways to make these resources more accessible in new ways, such as mobile devices. And that's it. That's a summary.
Thank you, Remy. Now we'll have a report on the challenges and solutions, and I know there was a lot of conversation.
So let me just start by saying this is the beginning of this conversation, of course. I don't have all the solutions. I wish that I did. I think I do sometimes. One of the biggest challenges, and I think we can all agree on this, is definitely funding. And in my group, we decided that a $1 billion investment in environmental education would be a good start. But honestly, it definitely does. It's a serious challenge, and it's something that if we are serious about it, it would need some funding to back it up, of course. We also felt it was really important that environmental education get involved and included in the standards, especially with the next generation science standards coming out here shortly. Having all of you certainly give some public feedback on those standards and really making sure as a community that those environmental education standards are in there and across the board is going to be vitally important. And I think also showing how environmental education can be integrated into those other standards that we already have, because a lot of times that is something that teachers struggle with, is seeing how it can fit into other places. In terms of teachers, certainly highlighting best practices and providing professional development, both in the informal and the formal setting, and also not forgetting those pre-service teachers, because if you get to the pre-service teachers, they're going to have a career's worth of impact on students. So really empowering them to be environmental educators. That's my DOE connection coming out. Environmental educators is important. The importance of the task force that's going to be formed is definitely a vital need that we have, and in terms of that, they need to have concrete goals. The task force will, and we've thought that it would be vitally important for them to also have a broad, inclusive advisory committee and include students as well and teachers in that committee, but including students is definitely an important part of that. And lastly, we thought a solution that could help immediately that would not require funding would be to get President Obama to give a speech about the importance of environmental education, because I think we all know that that can really spark some action right away and certainly highlight it and bring it to the forefront of the political conversation.
Thank you very much, Janelle. So I'm going to ask, is both of you coming up, or are you going to do it from there? Well, you both come up. And I just want to introduce them from this point of view. These are Einstein. When you put the word Einstein in front of anything, you think really smart. And these are really smart teachers who obviously didn't get to be who they are without some pretty tough selection process. So we're talking about superstars in their field. So they're going to give us just a couple of minutes on their perspective relative to what they heard from you today during the lunchtime break.
So I'm Lindsay, and Alan and I have the great task of giving you the entire teacher perspective in, just a couple of minutes, which is definitely a challenge. But each of us just picked out a couple of things that we were able to take from our experience in our classroom and then being in Washington, D.C. for the last year and kind of apply it to what we've been hearing today in these conversations. The first one for me has been in the last year and a half with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and just being here in D.C. that I've learned about so many resources that I had no idea that even existed when I was a classroom teacher. And that makes me kind of sad to know that there's all those teachers that are back in their classrooms that aren't aware of those resources. So in our conversations out in the hallway, we're talking about what's kind of inhibiting us from that. And a lot of it is time, and a lot of these resources are buried. So being able to have these resources readily available and promoting them to teachers, and we kind of gave the frame of, if I'm looking on the internet, it's going to take about 3 to 5 minutes of searching. If I don't see it, sorry, I give up. I've got stuff to do. So that's one of the definite things. Another one that came up within our discussion in here and in the hallway is that we tend to be the minority in our schools of the teachers that actually take our students outside. And it's not because we're amazing teachers, although I think they definitely are. It's because the other teachers at my school just have no idea what it looks like. That to take kids outside, what does that look like? And what does outdoor education or environmental education look like? And there's a couple solutions to that. One could definitely be with pre-service teachers having classes in which they are going outside, and so they learn about what an outdoor classroom looks like. But there's also a whole lot of teachers that are in service and that are in their classrooms right now, and that could be definitely available through professional development to them. One of the best professional development opportunities that I've ever had have been the teacher research experiences that I've done through the Polar Trek program and through NOAA Teacher at Sea, where I went out and I was with research teams doing everything that they did and seeing the science firsthand. And then it was super cool for me to go back into my classroom and get my kids outside and do the science and use the data outside as well. So those are just some little teacher tidbits. Go, Alan.
So my name is Alan Phipps. I'm serving 1 year at the National Science Foundation, and thank you so much for having us here. I think we all are on the same page in that many of our students in school suffer from nature deficit disorder, which I think we're going to hear a little bit more about from our next speaker. But I wanted to share with you a little bit of the concerns about the challenges of actually taking students outside and to be aware of those challenges. So for me to take a class outside and actually go across the street, now it becomes an official field trip. So I have to have the 1 to 10 ratio. So now I've got to pull other teachers to actually walk my kids across the street. So be mindful of that, but also think of ways to be innovative in partnerships. So for example, I am an honorary Girl Scout, all right? Because we did an artificial reef program, and I needed a way to go underwater with my students. Well, my district does not allow water-related field trips, which comes to question what happens if it rains. But we found a way to make it happen. So if you can be creative and innovative in those partnerships and look for ways to truly partner with each other, make those partnerships meaningful and lasting. So despite all those challenges that we face as teachers, the students absolutely love environmental education. They get on board. This has a huge impact on kids. And environmental education is just an incredible vehicle to reach some of these students that are really hard to reach. And so I encourage you to continue your efforts in helping K through grade, pre-K through grade, however you want to phrase it, to reach students of all ages and help them through environmental education. Thank you.
Alan's from Florida, and they don't allow water field.
Go figure.
Go figure. I'm going to close this with one thought. At the beginning of lunch, you heard from the PIA winners, and I had the opportunity to listen to the story from the Region 3 PIA winner and her experience of her trying to invent a rain barrel that produces electricity to solve poverty in Africa so they have safe water. That experience of watching her come through that, and then her commitment to solving that problem, should lead us all to a high level of respect for what young people are thinking about doing in this country and around the world. I've heard, this meeting has been like a lot of others where people talk about what's not happening and the problems and this and that. But I have the opportunity as a regional administrator to see kids in schools, see kids in universities, see people like this interacting, see my staff interacting with people like this and people in universities and kids in schools, all of that. And to the person, I see people like that young woman from Region 3 who's trying to solve these problems purposefully and with her education and with her know-how and with her network and with her connection. You need to remember billions of people now can access information on the internet and attack the problems we're so worried about. So I just want to applaud these people who create educated people who can go out and solve problems. That's what they're about, to lead. And I was on a college tour the other day. They were selling us a school, and they said the purpose of this college is to allow a young person to live a purposeful life. And that's what you guys are doing, and I think that's what we're all doing here. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for that. That sounded more like a lightning round than the one I had earlier, but there were some gems of definite insightfulness there from what you gleaned from all the work groups, and obviously it's really their perspectives on some of the materials and ideas that were already expressed by all of you in your breakout sessions. We're getting close to completing our day's work here, and there's really two things left between that and us completing and doing some more networking perhaps when we're done. And perhaps one of the more important ones for the day is our next keynote speaker. Richard Louv is a journalist and an author of 8 books. I suspect many people, Richard, have read at least one of your books here today. Obviously, many people have already mentioned the term nature deficit disorder, which is in Richard's Last Child in the Woods publication. What's interesting to me is that's already been translated into 10 different languages. Maybe there's 11 since the last time I checked, and it's been published in 15 different countries. His latest book, The Nature Principle, sort of looks at the dynamic of technology and nature in our lives, and I think hopes and looks for a future where we're immersed in nature to the extent that some of us have become immersed in technology and how the two work together. He's the founding chairman of the Children in Nature Network. He's been awarded the Audubon Medal, joining recipients like Rachel Carson and E.O. Wilson and President Jimmy Carter in that regard. He's also the recipient of the Cox Award from 2007, which is the highest honor at Clemson University for sustained achievement in public service. Other awards Richard has received is the 2008 San Diego Zoological Society Conservation Medal, the 2008 George B. Robb Conservation Medal from the Chicago Zoological Society, the 1909 International Making Cities Livable Jane Jacobs Award. He's also co-chairman with Bob Bateman of Canada's National Children in Nature Alliance. Most of us have read some of Richard's work, both his articles and his books. And Richard, we're looking forward to hearing from you this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Was that really the 1909 Making Cities?
Did I say 1909?
Yeah, but that's when we stopped doing it. So 1909 is, Frederick Law Olmsted and all of that. I want to speak quickly because I know you all have things to do, and sometimes it's hard for me to speak quickly. I was thinking this morning that I was thinking about Jaws on the boat. Remember when they first saw the big shark? Somebody, I don't remember who it was, but somebody on the boat said, we need a bigger boat. I think that we need a much bigger boat to support environmental education, to deal with these environmental problems we have, and to get our kids outdoors and get ourselves outdoors to reconnect to the natural world. I want to kind of start very, very quickly with something that just happened a couple weeks ago that really amazed me. I was speaking in Charlottesville, and the partner of Bill McDonough, many of you know who Bill McDonough was in the audience because he'd read a story in German about me. He said they actually said nice things, and he says they don't usually say nice things about Americans. And so he came to that speech. The next morning, he took me over to see McDonough. I've never met McDonough, but he's been a hero of mine for a long time. The Einstein of green urbanism, in many ways, green design, architecture. We spent the morning together, and we went through his offices, and this design caught my attention. And he later rolled it up and put it in a tube and sent it to me. He's working on a building in Spain. I believe it's a hospital. It's multi-story. One side is a green wall. One side is covered with solar panels done in the colors of a butterfly that is going extinct in that region. And the other side are balconies after balcony of a vertical garden that will feed the people in the hospital. The energy will be used from the solar panels in the hospital. I'm not sure what the green side is for, wall is for, but it's beautiful. All of that's great, except it takes the next step. The bottom floor is all open, glassed in. Anybody who walks into that hospital, butterflies will land on them. This is the butterfly that's about to go extinct. They're going to turn the bottom floor of this hospital into a butterfly factory if the plan goes through. Fill it with chrysalises. Apparently, they all kind of break open at the same time. The butterfly, like once a week, it's on schedule. And they're going to make a community ritual of this, letting these butterflies go. But they're not going to stop there. They're going to go to the businesses in that city and say, you can do this too. And they're going to go to the schools and say, you can do this too. They're going to go to the private homeowners and say, you can do this too. So this is a metaphor. That building may never become real. But it seems to be a metaphor for the future. A metaphor. Why can't our cities be like that? That building is not only producing energy, sustainable, but it's going beyond that. It's producing, obviously, food, more sustainability, but the existence of that surrounding nature as part of that building, biophilic design, is going to make the people in the hospital healthier. There are studies that show that biophilic design, people who have a view of nature instead of man-made culture actually get well faster. So this building is not only saving energy, it's producing energy, it's producing human energy in the form of health and intelligence, et cetera. It's cognitive functioning, as we know the research shows. But it's even going farther. It's giving birth. It's producing life that is going to be in that community. Now, that's just one butterfly, one building. But again, what if our cities could be like that? What if our homes? What if our workplaces? There's studies that have shown that integrating, using biophilic work design in workplaces, the workers get more productive. Sick time goes down. Turnover gets better. What if our future culture could be a little bit like that building? Now, I want to say that great ideas I've heard all day and all morning. Wonderful things happening. Many of the heroes of the, sometimes called the Children in Nature movement or the No Child Left Inside movement, are here. You know, the No Child Left Inside legislation. You know, it was wonderful hearing what NASCAR is doing, Disney, National Geographic, BioBlitz, the environmental organizations that are here, the Department of Education, the Department of Interior. Amazing things have been happening. And I know that NWF and NRPA are going to have an interesting announcement. Another amazing thing is going to be happening. Pediatricians are out there, as was mentioned, who are beginning to prescribe nature. I gave the keynote in 2010 to the American Academy of Pediatrics. Very nervous, because that's if there's one group that can get to parents, it's that one. I got off to a good start because my wife, who is a nurse practitioner, before I flew from San Diego to San Francisco, took my face in her hand and said, "Listen, Rich, pediatricians are different from other doctors. They're nice people." And so I told him that story, that 5,000 pediatricians, so got off to a good start. But, you know, they lined up. There were 300 pediatricians in a line to get me to sign Last Child, and they were saying they're going to go home and change their practice. That began a long time before that day. But today in Portland, Oregon, the Urban Park District in Portland is working with local physicians, including pediatricians, who are writing prescriptions. Sometimes it's more politically correct to say recommendations, to get outside, to go to the park. And so they get home, and I think the way this works is the family gets home, they get a call from the park district, says, "Here's what we can do for you. Show up, we'll help you with your green exercise," which, by the way, pound for pound works better than an indoors gym in terms of the payoff for the same number of calories expended. So they go to the park, they get their green exercise, gets it signed off. The park rangers now are acting as park health paraprofessionals, new role for them, great role. The family goes home, the prescription goes back to the doctors. They're going to study that over time to see how it works. These kind of things are happening all over the country. Children in Nature Network has recorded so far over 100 regional campaigns. That's statewide, citywide, provincial-wide in Canada. One of the first was the Cincinnati regional campaign to get kids outdoors, brought people to the same table, don't usually want to be at the same table, conservatives, liberals, conservationists, developers, et cetera. That one, by the way, in the beginning was called Leave No Child Inside Cincinnati. And then they thought about that for a while. And I think they put in a comma in there somewhere. In any case, you know, there are obviously huge barriers. One of those is funding, and that's kind of the elephant in the room this morning, today. I hope that the next time that the White House holds a summit on environmental education, there is a commitment to 5 times the amount of money that was cut. Perhaps... And perhaps that will happen in unexpected ways, spread out through multiple departments, as it should be anyhow. But let's hope for that. But beyond that, building a new constituency for environmental education, for the environment itself, increasingly I've been thinking about, and many of us have, what are the things that create self-replicating social change, that go beyond the schools, that go beyond government, et cetera? One of those examples is family nature clubs. A few years ago, a teacher and a second grade teacher and father of 2 small children emailed me and said that he and his wife had gotten inspired. They started getting their kids outdoors to the park on Saturdays. One day the 5-year-old tugs on his father's pant leg and says, "Dad, how come we're the only family having this much fun?" He started inviting other families. Today, they formed a club, Family Nature Club. They have over 700 families on his mailing list. And they arrange nature play dates together on their own. You can download a free toolkit from the Children in Nature Network webpage on how to start your own. There's, I think, 126 of those. Many of them have hundreds of families, not individuals, families as members. What if that took off? It's just one idea. What if that took off and in 5 years there were 5,000 or 10,000 of those family nature clubs with hundreds of families each? At that point, you're talking about self-replicating social change. You don't have to wait for a foundation. And that, in turn, and that's just one idea, that in turn, I think, builds a bigger constituency for environmental education, for stopping global warming, et cetera, or slowing it. I think we need to build a bigger boat. Let me end here by sharing something with you. I've been thinking more and more about how we need more than sustainability. You know, Bill McDonough has a great quote. He says, "Do you really want a sustainable marriage? Don't you want something better than that?" And I use the word sustainability. I don't have a better one, obviously. But I'll tell you, particularly when I talk to college students, high school students, that word does not exactly light up their life, their eyes, you know? And I notice that they come up to me and they talk about, well, we got to be energy efficient. We got to have solar panels and all of that. We can't be on oil. And all of that is true. Bare minimum, got to do that. That's the foundation. When they talk to me about that, their eyes kind of look like this. But when they come up and say, I want to change my career, I want to connect kids to nature. I want a whole life of doing that. I want to connect adults to nature. Yeah? I want to be an architect that does this. I want to be a teacher who does this. I want to be, you know, a park person who does this. I want to be a pediatrician who does it. I want to be an attorney who does it. The challenges of the CC&Rs and these community associations that kids can't even step on the grass. You know, I want to connect people to nature. Their eyes look like that when they talk about that. I think that environmental education has a great opportunity. It's already expanded in that direction to expand even more in that direction. I think we need a new nature movement. That's, for lack of a better phrase, that's the one I've been using. Environmentalism is a pretty small boat right now, unfortunately. We need a bigger boat with a lot more diverse kind of folks on that boat. Obviously, that was, Akima talked eloquently about that, others did this morning. Some of that is diversity of race and culture. Some of it is diversity of profession, et cetera. Some of it is diversity of politics. We actually need conservatives on that boat as well as liberals. If we had a new nature movement that really brought together, for instance, the organic gardening people and the immigrant farmers in downtown San Diego, you know, who have their own farmers market now. If we brought together them with attorneys, with insurance companies, with, you know, Disney and all these others, as well as pediatricians and architects and urban planners, and there's a whole long list I've got of professions that can now be applied to creating a different future. The main thing that I've been worried about or thinking about recently, this is my theory. I understand recently there's a little bit of science to back this up, but I've not said this based on science, but based on my sense of talking to a whole lot of people over the last few years. I think that if you ask most Americans to come up with instant images, don't sit down, don't be rational, don't think about it too much, of what the far future looks like, I think the images that come into most Americans' mind right then are images of Blade Runner, Mad Max, now the Hunger Games, kind of a post-apocalyptic future, usually where nature's been stripped or or so changed it's unrecognizable, along with our humanity. If I'm right, and I hope I'm not right, but if I'm right, then we are in more trouble than we know. I've often paraphrased Martin Luther King, who said that any movement, any culture will fail if it cannot paint a picture of a world that people will want to go to. Not just survival, but a world we'd really like to live in more than the one we're living in now. As others have said, his speech was not called "I Have a Nightmare." So I was challenged on this because I've been saying that for a long time. And I was challenged on this a few months ago by a high school girl who was a student who was sitting right about over there. There was about 400 or 600 middle school and high school students in the audience, tough crowd. And she stood up when I was done and she said, "Well, Mr. Liu, this is fine, and all, but, I still haven't seen your painting of the world you want to go to." And I said, "Well, I wrote 2 books." And she said, "I don't want to read your books." That's okay, that's all right. Millions don't want to read mine. But she really challenged me. She says, "I want to hear it right now." I knew I had to do this. So I did my best. I gave some shotgun images. And it kind of worked. And I went home and I wrote it down. And by the way, my publisher sent, I think, 25 copies of this. They're over in my satchel over there. Just reach in and get them. They're free. I was waiting to find out the mood of the meeting this morning before I gave them away. But they're over there. Just get one if you want one. We've added something to the end of the nature principle, which is about adults as well as kids. The whole book is. And the book was an attempt to paint that picture, but within my very limited abilities, but I needed something shorter. So we've added a section at the back called Toward a New Nature Movement. And it has in it the written form of what I told that girl. And it's something I've been sharing. And it's about 800 words. I'll read it, and then I'll go sit down. Imagine a world in which all children grow up with a deep understanding of the life around them, where all of us know the animals and plants of our own backyards, as well as we know the televised Amazon rainforest, or better. Where the more high-tech our lives become, the more we experience nature in our lives. Where we come to all of our senses, including our sense of humility, where we feel more alive. We seek a newer world where we not only conserve nature but create it, where we live, work, learn, and play, where yards and open spaces are alive with native species, where bird migration routes are healed by human care, where wildlife corridors in every city serve as the bronchial and arterial passageways of life and meaning, where not only public land, but private property, voluntarily, garden to yard, is transformed by us into butterfly zones, and then across the country into a homegrown national park, where neighbors use land trust law to create their own button parks, small enough to sew on themselves, where cities become incubators of biodiversity, where pediatricians and other health professionals prescribe nature, where antidepressants and pharmaceuticals are prescribed less and nature prescribed more, where hospitals and prisons offer gardens that heal, where nearby nature provides healing and reduces stress, where obesity of children and adults is reduced through nature play, a world where restorative cities produce their own energy and much of their own food, where empty lots become community gardens, where skyscrapers become vertical farms with spirals and decks and roofs that reduce stress even as they produce food, where biophilic design transforms green architecture and urban design into something beyond what we understand those mean now, and go beyond the goal of just conserving energy and toward the creation of environments that produce human energy, higher productivity, greater health, more ability to concentrate and create, where developers not only build new neighborhoods that incorporate nature, but even more important, redevelop decaying inner city and decaying suburban neighborhoods, replacing redundant aging shopping malls with eco-villages that not only provide more quote-unquote natural habitat, green roofs and button parks and wildlife corridors, but also support higher human populations than today's suburbs. Where neighborhoods are no longer surrounded by walls to keep people out, but by orchards for children to harvest. Imagine a world in which small towns, now deserted across the Great Plains, return in new form, internet connected, surrounded by organic farms, edible prairies, and beauty. Where streams in cities and countryside are restored, unearthed to the daylight, their natural curves, and life returned. A newer world where the point of education is not rote and drill, but wonder and awe. Where schools use the power of the natural world to stimulate learning and creativity. Where every school has a natural space where children experience the joy of learning through play once again. Where teachers are encouraged to take their students on field trips to the nearby woods and canyons and streams and shores. Where educators feel their own sense of hope and excitement returning to their profession and to their own hearts. Where connecting people to nature becomes a growth industry. Where new businesses emerge to help us transform our homes, our workplaces, our lives through nature. Where the restorative and healing powers of the natural world and the worth of watersheds and natural systems are included in every regional economic study. Where natural history becomes as important as human history to who we are. Where history is defined less by the battles of war and more by the stories of our kinship. A newer world where children and adults feel a deep sense of identity with the bioregions in which they live, where children experience the joy of being in nature before they learn of its destruction. Where children can lie in the grass on a hillside for hours and watch the clouds become the faces of the future. Where as a species, we no longer feel so alone. Where every child and every adult has a human right to a connection to the natural world and shares the responsibility for caring for it. Where every human being, regardless of race or economic status or gender or sexual identity, has the opportunity to help create that world. Imagine a world where the strength of our spirit is not measured by the specificity of our language, but by the care and kinship we share with each other and with our fellow species on this earth. A world in which our last days are lived in the arms of Mother Nature, of land and sky, water and soil, wind and sea, a newer world we seek and to which we return. And I end this with a quote from Tennyson that a fellow that used to spend a lot of time in the White House used to quote a lot, and he was one of my heroes when I was in college. The long day wanes, the slow moon climbs, the deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Those are truly inspirational and uplifting, and we really appreciate you taking that time with us today. And your frankness and your straightforwardness is always appreciated. Let me also thank everybody who came today. It's a very uplifting subject that we're working on here. We are bound together by a vision of a more literate, environmentally speaking, society, and all that would flow from that. And so I want to thank all of you for coming today and sharing your ideas, thoughts, listening to a lot of talking too. I think that always comes with these summits. But I think good words were said, and I was greatly appreciative of much of the ideas that were presented today. I also want to thank the Presidential Environmental Youth Awardees who came today to share their achievements. I mean, if there's anything that's more uplifting than young people getting into the depth of the environmental issues to the extent that these students were. I don't know what it is. I was moved by the work that they've been doing and the depth of which their commitment exists, even beyond the boundaries of our country. It was really a very remarkable and heartwarming for me to see that. They inspired me for sure. And I want to thank all the federal family, especially the ones that have been standing. And all those who participated in getting us organized, and all the work we have ahead of us, as I think you now perhaps understand what we have in front of us. A lot of work to be done. I recognize that we have a big effort underway on STEM and America's Great Outdoors and STEM and women. All of these things are going to be important things for us to link up to, and it's really important for us to be coordinated. Perhaps, Richard, I will be the elephant herder, handler, or whatever you want to call it. Budgets are a problem that I think we need to face honestly and straightforwardly. They're not going to be magically transformed. And I don't want any of you to think that what we're talking about by way of improved coordination, partners, and strengthening our bonds here among all these different programs, agencies, and potential partners is an alternative to budgets. It is not. But it is an imperative, equally so, that we find ways to improve our game, to up our game, to recommit as powerfully as we possibly can the need for partners in the federal family and states and local governments to work together more than we ever have before. Tremendous ideas, I think, today that I heard that are going to help our nascent little federal task force, which has yet to meet except by phone and commit. You heard commitments from the highest levels of the agencies who've stepped up to take leadership. I can assure you we will be following up on that. Richard, I hope it will help build a bigger boat, at least in the federal family. We have tons of things going on that are not as coordinated as they could be. If I had another 30 seconds for another lightning round with my federal panel, I would have asked them, do they agree or disagree that we're doing everything we can to coordinate our work that's related as best we can? And I know what their answers would have been. We're doing it, but we're not doing as much as we could. And we all know that. I think we know that in our hearts, and we're committed to changing it. Some ideas that I heard today that I think will be directly related to this are some increased ideas on partner opportunities. We tried to invite people today who have not been so-called traditional partners, but certainly partners to many, many people. And we need to continue that. That's part of the boat. We need to stop just speaking to the choir, which I think I've heard several times today, and that we need to expand in that regard. I think the federal government can provide leadership to expanding the size of the boat. I've heard ideas that the federal task force ought to look at developing a combined federal environmental education strategy. I don't think we've set to task to do that in the past, or if we have, it has not endured. Perhaps we use a different word than it isn't sustainable, but I think it is a task that's worth pursuing, and I think that idea is one that I will personally bring to the task force and see how we might lay out that scope. I heard ideas of the kinds of partners we might want to include. I heard ideas of how to work with states. I heard ideas about having an advisory group, and I think we will pursue that. We will pursue having an advisory group to that task force. We will look at an advisory group that could have subgroups that include students and teachers. I think that that was a really powerful idea, and coming from a family my spouse is a teacher, I would obviously be happier in my home if I was involving teachers in Actually, I already do, since she used to teach AP environmental science. So it's all in the family, as they say. So I like the idea of thinking of a future world I think we all do. I hope that we think something differently than dystopia. So those of us who read a lot of science fiction, there are plenty of authors out there, Richard, and I will send you an email list of them, who have a different, more utopian view of the future. And I think that that's what humans are destined for, but we're going to have to work pretty hard to get there as a species. So I am moved by some of these notes today. I'm excited to get going on the federal family. I want you to know it's not an alternative, but an imperative, and that we will obviously all continue to work together on everything we need to work on. So thank you all for coming. Give yourselves a great round of applause.